I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons first. Thank you so much to my Bibliospren, Bibliohowlers, and my Bibliomancers. It means a lot to me that you give me your extra support for my passion and hobby. Hi everyone, Petrik here. So for today's video, this will be again another recommendation video based on a very popular series, because last month I posted about if you like the First Law series, here are some recommendations. And based on that video, I got some requests asking for A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin now. So of course, today's video, especially with the recent release of House of the Dragon Season 2, I think it is time to talk about what books to recommend if you love reading A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. And I know there used to be the day when every fantasy book, every epic fantasy book, especially grimdark fantasy, is marketed toward every readers who love A Song of Ice and Fire. So these are just my recommendations based on categories, just like usual. These are categories that, in my opinion, is akin to reading A Song of Ice and Fire, and I will recommend this series based on that. As always, it will make more sense after I progress through the video. So let's begin. The first obvious recommendation is of course to read A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms and also Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. Do not get me wrong, Fire and Blood, in terms of narrative, it is very different to A Song of Ice and Fire. And A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is also, well, it is wholesome. It is so much more wholesome and comfortable to read compared to A Song of Ice and Fire, compared to the main books in A Song of Ice and Fire. But I do still maintain strongly to give these two books a try if you love the main books in A Song of Ice and Fire. Why do I say this? Because for whatever reasons, it seems like quite a lot of people, they read only the main books, but they did not continue with A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms and also Fire and Blood. And I think if you really love the main books, I do think that you have to give these two prequel novels a try. I think they are still worth your time very much. I love both of them in their own way. And other than that, now let's move on to the category of tone and narrative wise. The first one that I want to recommend, this is for The Dagger and the Coin by Daniel Abraham. As far as narrative goes and also style, I think Daniel Abraham is really the closest one to George R.R. Martin. And it is quite a popular information that Daniel Abraham do study under George R.R. Martin when it comes to writing and storytelling. And I think it is reflected very well, not only in The Dagger and the Coin, but also in The Expanse and in some way in Long Price Quartet. But I think the most evident one is in The Dagger and the Coin series. It is a criminally underrated series because despite the popularity of the Expanse series, somehow Daniel Abraham's fantasy books, they are so much more under the radar and underrated. I haven't read the Kit Hamar trilogy yet, so I cannot tell anything about that. But I do think that if you love reading A Song of Ice and Fire, I do think that The Dagger and the Coin is worth your time. Just one caveat, I do think you will have to be patient with the first book in the series. I think this is also a big reason why Daniel Abraham's fantasy books are not that popular, because his first book are generally much more weaker compared to the rest of the series. Whether it is the Long Price Quartet or The Dagger and the Coin, both face the similar issue, in my opinion anyway. But I do think overall this is an incredible series with one of the most iconic villains that I have ever come across in fantasy fiction. And after that, of course, based on the same category, I have to recommend The First Law World by Joe Abercrombie, my favorite grimdark fantasy series of all time. I remember back then when I was still studying to read fantasy novels, I searched on the internet. I have mentioned this plenty of times, but yeah, I searched on the internet what series to read if you love watching a Game of Thrones. And well, I got a lot of recommendations. Some make sense, some didn't, but back then I didn't know anything. So first, I started from Mistborn. Well, there were some stuff, I guess, from the end of the first book that reminded me of watching a Game of Thrones from Mistborn. I don't want to mention too much here because it is spoiler. But as far as tone and also the greedy world, the greedy narrative, and also the merciless nature of the world and execution, I think The First Law World is one to read if you love reading A Song of Ice and Fire. George Martin and also Joe Abercrombie, I think there are many similarities between the two. Personally speaking, I do love reading the characterizations and battle battle scenes of Joe Abercrombie's more than George Martin. But George Martin excels more when it comes to the matter of politics, intrigue, and also world building. Intricate world building, I think in that aspect, George R.R. Martin definitely won. But I love these two series. I love the First World more. But yeah, I love these two, and I think I will always recommend the First World for those of you who love reading A Song of Ice and Fire, and maybe you want a more in-depth characterizations. At least, again, that's my opinion. I know that some people don't agree with the opinion that Joe Abercrombie's characterizations is better than George Martin's. But moving on to the next category, speaking of merciless, one of the things that I love most about A Song of Ice and Fire is how not safe any of the characters were. So the next category is that, and honestly, this is what I would love to read more in fantasy or sci-fi, feeling that the characters are not safe, that everyone is always in danger, everyone can be killed off. And with that in mind, I will start with The Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu, one of my top favorite series of all time. And I think even to this day, even though it is quite popular on BookTube for a while, but I think even to this day, this one in the general market is still quite underrated and under the radar. I think this is one of the greatest epic fantasy series of all time. And if you love that aspect of A Song of Ice and Fire, of the massive world building, deadly political intrigue, and also feeling that no one is safe from danger, please give The Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu a try. It is a terrific series, one of the greatest fantasy series of all time, really. I find it absolutely difficult to find a better writer when it comes to the matter of prose than Ken Liu. Not gonna lie, in the genre, it is that good. And after that, I will move on to The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. Now, there are plenty of similarities between these two, even though narrative-wise and tone, they are very different from one another. But for example, Corban, the main character, he has a wolf and also a raven, just like Jon Snow from A Song of Ice and Fire. But other than that, as I said, this is the same category. John Gwynne is so brutal toward his characters. No one is really safe from danger. That's my perspective, and it is what drew me into The Faithful and the Fallen in the first place. It is what made me really love The Faithful and the Fallen. One of the many things, anyway. And yeah, if you want to read a heroic epic fantasy with this aspect from A Song of Ice and Fire, please give The Faithful and the Fallen a try. But do note that the characters, the good and the bad characters in The Faithful and the Fallen are definitely more clear compared to A Song of Ice and Fire, where everything falls a bit on the morally shade of grey. But moving on to the next category, this is still a bit similar, but this one is more rooted in political intrigue. Deadly and also thrilling political intrigue is one of the best aspects of A Song of Ice and Fire. And with that in mind, I want to recommend the Riftwar Empire trilogy by Raymond E. Feist and Janny Wurts. Again, one of the best trilogies of all time, especially The Daughter of the Empire and Servant of the Empire. The first two books in the trilogy, they are just so good. And I have a fun feeling for this trilogy because not only Daughter of the Empire is one of the greatest first book to a trilogy, but Servant of the Empire, well, it accompanied me during my surgery, during my post-surgery recovery moments, and I think because of that, I have a fond feeling toward this trilogy. But again, back to topic, when it comes to the matter of deadly political intrigue and also one that you cannot put down and feeling that everyone is always in danger, I think Riftwar Empire trilogy is really your pick. In my honest opinion, it is much better than the first trilogy in the main Riftwar saga or Riftwar cycle. Yeah, it is much better. But once again, that's my opinion and that's my recommendations. And finally, the last series that I want to recommend, this is not a fantasy series, but this is a historical fiction series, and this is the Conqueror or the Genghis Khan series by Conn Iggulden. One of my favorite historical fiction series, and I think if you have watched or read the first book in the Game of Thrones, you might realize that the Mongolian are a big part of the inspiration behind the Dothraki. And there is one event in the Game of Thrones, well, without giving spoilers, the Golden Crown. If you have read or watched a Game of Thrones, you will know this scene. The Golden Crown, if I'm not mistaken, is taken directly from an action that Genghis Khan did. And that one is also in the Conqueror series, of course. And well, this is an amazing series. I do wish that more fantasy readers will give this series a try, just like they gave the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell a try. I think if you love A Song of Ice and Fire, you will really love the Conqueror series by Conn Iggulden. So yeah, that's really my 7 recommendations for those of you who want to read more books and also more series that might have a chance of reminding why you love A Song of Ice and Fire in the first place. And of course, none of them will be super similar to A Song of Ice and Fire, but I think personally, if people ask me what books or series to recommend, if they like A Song of Ice and Fire, these 7 will be my top recommendations for these different reasons that I just mentioned. But yeah, that's really the end of today's video. Do let me know what you think about my recommendations. Of course, do tell me what books or series would you recommend to those who love A Song of Ice and Fire. As always, thank you so much for watching and thank you for your support. Bye bye. Lastly, I want to say thank you so much once again to all my patrons who keep on supporting me.